Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Chris McPherson Show, your home of black and white across your sporting landscape. No grey opinions. We've got a big episode coming to you, episode 20 of our show. We're proud to make it to this milestone, and we appreciate you tuning in and sharing it with your friends. So make sure you keep getting that love out there. Of course, we have a wonderful co-host coming onto the show this week. We're going to be joined by Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. He's going to come in and chip in around a few different sports. Lockie Avil from Round Ball Australia is going to come and talk football with us. We have a nice little cameo from a man behind the ones and twos, JR Carter, joining us again on screen, which we love to see. And on debut, Adam Martin coming to talk to you about the NRL. He comes to us from the Talking Parra podcast. Of course, if you want to keep up to date in between episodes with everything that's going on in the Chris McPherson Show's broader world, make sure you follow us on all of our social media channels. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, and on TikTok, and of course our home here on YouTube. And if you want the audio only version or you prefer the platform, then you can find us on Spotify. You can get us audio and video there. Just keep on following along and make sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel. In the meantime, let's get things underway. I'm going to step it up. I'm going to jump onto the soapbox for a topic that's very close to home, something I'm very passionate about. We're going to talk about trolls in the social media space. Sport is a pursuit of skill, discipline, and resilience, but for British tennis stars Emma Raducanu and Katie Boulder, it's also come with something no athlete should have to endure. Relentless online abuse, and in Raducanu's case, even real-world danger. Let's start with Raducanu. She shocked the world in 2021, winning the US Open as an 18-year-old qualifier. One of the great breakout stories in recent memory. But instead of being given time to grow, she was put under a microscope. Every match, every injury, every decision picked apart by so-called fans on social media, trolls, if you will. And when the wins didn't immediately follow, the abuse ramped up. Overhyped, weak, a fluke. People questioning her dedication as if they knew what it took physically and mentally to compete at the highest level. But the online abuse isn't even the worst of it. Recently, during a tournament, Raducanu had to resort to hiding behind the umpire's chair to avoid a follower, a stalker, someone who had followed her to the match, someone who had continued to pursue and abuse her. This is not something that anyone, an elite athlete or otherwise, in the midst of their job should be worrying about. We've got an elite athlete here on the court, not having to focus on her game, not being able to worry just about her opponent, but fearing for her own safety. No one should go through that in the pursuit of their career. She's not alone in facing this kind of scrutiny. Katie Boulder, Britain's current number one, has come out in support of Raducanu, talking about how she's dealt with relentless criticism too, rising through the ranks, winning WTA titles, but it's not enough for the fans hiding behind their keyboards. She's endured abuse, body shaming, and people more interested in her relationship with Alex de Minaur than her results. Boulder's spoken about the double standards, how male players can struggle with form, take time off, and no one questions it. But a female player does the same, and again, mentally weak, fragile, not serious enough, it's ridiculous. And if it's not just words, the online hate and real-world threats that athletes face have real consequences. It adds to the pressure, the scrutiny, that constant negativity. It wears people down. And for what? Because they've just dared to put themselves out there, because they've challenged, because they've succeeded. It's not good enough. What's the solution? Well, social media companies cracking down harder, you might say. But realistically, maybe some harsher penalties for people who do it. We need to track them down. Realistically, though, people need to just stop. The standard that we walk past is the standard we're prepared to accept. Those of us need to take a stand. We need to call out people we know who are doing this. It's just not right, because it isn't just about Emma and Katie. It's about the way we treat athletes and people in general, and it's not good enough. So here's a thought. Instead of tearing down players, instead of tearing down people who are out there giving their best for everything in their sport or their pursuit of their career, maybe let's try supporting them instead. Tennis should be about respect. Sport should be about respect. Let's start acting like it. Well, taking a deep breath after I let that all out on the soapbox, it's now time to head around the grounds, and we are joined by a couple of friendly faces, you might call them. I feel left out not having a beard in this trio, but our producer, JR Carter. JR, good to have you back on the screen.
Good to be back, Chris.
And, of course, the illustrious man from the Third Man Up podcast. He's got the best head of hair on that podcast. Is Brody Burrows.
Tell you what, mate, don't put my beard next to JR's. I 100% look like I'm a 13-year-old trying to grow it, but I'll take what I can get.
The real progression, if you go right to left on this screen right now, is
absolutely.
Much to prepubescent on my side. But anyway, we're here to pick up those things that don't quite fit into our usual sporting categories, to pull apart the black and white of a few odds and ends, if you will. And JR, you're our resident motorsport guru. The F1 season, not on the track so much, has gotten underway, but the season launch happened, and the biggest talking point was probably just crowd reaction.
Yeah, so the F175 was happening about as we went to air last week, and there was a couple of interesting things. So first thing, like massive event they did for the 75th anniversary at Wembley, hosted by Jack Whitehall. But the big takeaways were Max Verstappen getting booed by the English fans again. Jos Verstappen has been in the media this week mentioning that Max is not going to participate in anything England related anymore. So question marks are, does Max go to Silverstone? Is that where we're at? Most likely not. The other big takeaway was just the livery launch. While it was cool to have it like up in lights in that sort of massive arena, sort of where we had some live music, we had comedians, other things, the liveries were pretty similar to last year. The only one with any major differences was the Racing Bulls. And that's a team that's sort of gone through another rebrand again. So this is like the third rebrand in as many years, really, for what started out as a Toro Rosso team. But the livery itself is very reminiscent of the Honda anniversary livery that the Red Bull ran a few years ago. So not a lot of like mind-blowing changes there. So, but still good to see F1 in a massive arena sort of scale.
It certainly is. I think it was really good, Bros, just to see them trying something, I guess, a little bit different and rolling it out this way. As we said, Max Verstappen might not have loved it, but again, something new, and it's always worth giving these things a bit of a try to take your sport to the next level.
Oh, absolutely, mate. And you see it now across the world of sports as well. And you got to adapt. You got to keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And the consumers, and it's so easy now to watch it from anywhere. You see the social impact. It's just absolutely everywhere you look across every social media channel. So it's very interesting about Verstappen now and what happens from here, and especially over the next 6 months. So I can't wait to see where he goes and how much he'll get booed just poking his head around England.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting to see if he does pop his head up in England again, how much he's booed, chased, harassed, and all of the other things. Not that we encourage anyone to do anything more than booing and giving some constructive verbal feedback to athletes in their day-to-day. They don't need to go beyond that. But it will be interesting. Certainly if his dad has too much to say about it, as we saw, then we might be in a very different spot. Jos is no stranger to the F1 circuit, JR, but he's being very vocal, which is nice and easy when it's not his salary that's going to be determined by no-shows.
Well, here's the question. Is Jos going to be allowed to even attend a Red Bull garage session at any point this season? Like, the tension's still there between him and Horner. Like, is Jos just talking shit? Most likely.
Be out of character, that's for sure. Something that isn't so shit, to use your word, JR, is the basketball domestic scene in Australia. It's continuing to build, and we are at finals time, Brody. Unfortunately for a lot of metropolitan fans of New South Wales, Sydney have bowed out in the men's. In the men's, though, the competition completely heating up. Illawarra has been the dominant side this season. They finished top of the ladder. Perth and Melbourne, though, is probably the more mouth-watering of the semi-finals. Illawarra will take on Southeast Melbourne. So if you're a Melbourneite, lots to cheer for, both sides there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Melbourne United up against the MVP in Bryce Cotton. The 5-time MVP in Bryce Cotton, I should say, is the one that's got my attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're really seeing now that the NBL is also becoming a serious feeder into the NBA. I think there's 18 players playing in the NBA now that have come through the NBL. So we're seeing the quality of the NBL go up. The crowd numbers are doing, they're absolutely phenomenal at the moment, no matter where you go. And I think just the NBL now is really becoming a serious competition around the world. And I'm excited for it to see what it's like in maybe 1 or 2 years' time. But I think now, obviously going deep into finals, I'd love to see some, maybe big series on the cards, no sweeps, and really just start heating up and adding some hype to what is already, I think, a great basketball comp that we've got here in Australia.
It's been red hot. I can't wait for it. It gets underway Thursday night, so the day that this show goes live is the first game. And over the next week, we've got a game basically every day if we go to 3-game series. So the Melbourne United and Perth series will get underway first, and then Illawarra will host Southeast Melbourne in their first leg on Friday, and then we head into Saturday, Sunday. Monday we have a breather, and then we go Tuesday, Wednesday. So hopefully they go to 3, as you said, and then we get to a grand final. I'd love to see Illawarra Hawks. It's a great story. As much as I'm a Kings fan, it is a really good story what they're doing there. What Tatum's doing as the coach. Obviously, we know what his son's doing over there, winning NBA championships. But if he could have a ring of his own, that'd be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're sort of seeing it a lot lately that, these smaller clubs, I suppose you'd call it in NBL land, are going they're going gangbusters, and they're well attended. They run really well. I mean, look at the Jack Jumpers. They went from not even being a club to being, one of the most regularly or one of the highest consistent attendances across the NBL. Social media ratings through the roof, and it would be great for everyone, and especially just to change it up, to keep having these new teams, teams that have maybe struggled a lot in the past, to come through and hopefully take the ring. I mean, that's what the NBL would be hoping, I think, too.
Yeah, certainly. On that, you mentioned the Jack Jumpers. They did sell 51% through the week. Valuation of $35 million. So that's huge when you think about it in terms of, obviously, it's not anywhere near the $1 billion valuation we see in the US, but for a team that is only a few years old, be valued at $35 million. Astor Capital will take a stake in the middle of the year for assuming full ownership in 2 years' time. So it's good to see there's money in Aussie sport. On the topic of small franchises, though, in terms of geographic location, I'll get that word out eventually. Bendigo are setting themselves a roaring pace in the WNBL. They got a win in their first semi-final over the weekend. They may have booked their spot in the final. They're playing against the Sydney Flames at the moment in the semi-final series, and then in the other semi-final, it's Townsville and Perth. Perth essentially the main hope of being the only city of having teams in both the men's and women's grand finals, that's for sure, as it sits. But there's a lot of water going to that bridge. There's games going on as we speak, and those series are well in flux as well. So we need to give a shout out to the women and the town of Bendigo. I'm sure they'll be enraptured if they can get another title out there. I'm not sure there's much else that goes on out there, lads.
Mate, there's very little happening in Bendigo, sort of week to week, having some mates that are based out there. But look, it's good to see just new franchises getting involved in these sports as well. So, like, just adding sort of more geographic locations, like you said.
It's always good to have a geographic spread in some of these regional towns, supporting some WNBL franchise. They might have the scale to go and get ALeague or NRL or AFL or some of these other bigger sporting codes. So it's great to see the likes of, Townsville, obviously an NRL team, but Townsville and Bendigo fighting it out there. We'll wait and see how that plays out. Speaking of people taking a different approach to things, JR, in the ice hockey world, we kind of I had a bit of a rant last week in the Maccas Musing talking about the NRL All-Stars and have they lost their way. We talked about the NBA All-Stars and whether it's essentially entertainment. It's a bit like Brody's favourite celebrity fight nights. It's not really a sport anymore, but the NHL have tried to add some integrity back into their All-Star equivalent event.
They have. So previously, the All-Stars weekend for the NHL followed a pretty similar format to what we've seen in the NBA. So like, there's the skills clinics, there's all those competitions leading up to an All-Stars game. This year, they took a different approach and they did a 4 nations series where we had 4 of the top nations, so not the actual top nations, because one of the rules, much like the NRL Origin series, like with the exception of perhaps when Alfie Langer came home that year, is that one of the stipulations was the players had to be in the NHL. We've seen Canada beat the USA in overtime in a very well-played game for a 3-2 scoreline for them just get that over the line. And Canada gets some bragging rights finally on the USA at the moment, given the climate that's going on at the moment.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting space. There's no love lost between those two at the best of the times on an ice hockey rink, but it added some extra punch. I think Justin Trudeau had some things to say. But the ice hockey world is so tense with Canada and the USA because the Americans think they own the league, but the Canadians provide, and you and I were talking about this off air, JR, if you go back about 30 years, they provided 90+% of the players. Now it's not quite at that level. But they're still providing the dominant, I think at the moment, 358 Canadian nationals in the NHL versus 254. So they still outstrip the Americans, sort of 7-5. But they're the 2 dominant nations, so no surprise they made it through there. But as I said, Trudeau didn't miss the opportunity just to fire a shot over the bow.
No, absolutely. Like Canada's like in a very odd space politically right now. Like, let's make no mistake, what's being touted is never going to happen. And from a mathematical point of view, there's too many provinces for it to become the 51st state. They had to go quite a higher number, realistically. So there's some stupidity going on all over that.
There's a lot of stupidity going on in a lot of politics around the world, but I don't think we want to delve into those murky depths. Rhodes, the interesting thing here was that it wasn't the top 4 teams on rankings. JR talked about it. They had to be NHL eligible. So it was, Canada, the USA, Sweden, and Finland. those are 4 of the 5 countries that fortunately provide the top number of players in the NHL. No surprises, our friends, while we're speaking of politics in Russia, provide the 4th amount, and they weren't invited for some reason, but the Germans, who sit quite high in the rankings alongside the Russians, they just didn't have enough. They only provide 7. A lot of European leagues feature German players. So good to see the NHL making some commercial decisions, but also spreading it. They could have quite easily just made it USA versus Canada, but creating some more inclusion for, when we look at those players, another 130 odd players that are eligible for Sweden and Finland.
Yeah, I think JR said it well, just touching on the NBA as well. I mean, the NBA All-Star Weekend has turned into a bit of a joke. Like, let's be honest. It has turned into a bit of a joke, and there's a lot of talk about that getting completely flipped on its head now and becoming a similar concept, whether it's a USA versus the rest of the world. And I think it's something's got to happen. I mean, everyone wants to beat the USA. Let's get some sort of competitiveness back in there. And I think it's great what it's done. It's actually created a way to see the star players playing in a competitive realm, which we don't really see representing their nations, unless it's Olympics or, another big event like that. And I think it's just something regular throughout the season that, people can get around too. So there's definitely room for improvement in the NHL, but I would love to see a similar concept being brought into the NBA as well.
Yeah, I'd certainly love to see that. I think there's some great concept there. I think the NHL should expand this and maybe, a bit like the AFL used to have in the State of Origin, Brody, get some allies. There's only one reason I want that, and that's JR and I were talking about this gentleman before. He's Welsh by birth, but he's Australian by his heritage and choice, and that is Nathan Walker. He's playing at the St. Louis Blues. He's racked up nearly 50 games this year. He's the only Aussie in the NHL at the moment, and look, he's been there for a long time. So we just want to see him on the bigger stage and getting more chance because, Aussie's up in lights of the way we need to see every sport, Broads.
Yeah, it sounds like we'll be joining up with the Russians if they're not allowed. We'll make up an allies side with the Russians. And I mean, if we're allies with the Russians, I don't know what we'll call ourselves, but it'll be interesting, won't it?
Yeah, I was thinking more we might, bundle in with maybe the Czechs and the Slovakians, as much as we know they don't like each other. But
we'll try the Russians in there too, mate. We'll create world peace through hockey.
We will have to wait 2 years for this because the NHL has committed to going back to their previous format next year, and they probably will go turnabout for the next few years, which, again, adds variety. So next year, back to the standard all-star format.
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see. But look, if the NHL are listening, their commissioners, etc., we are available on a hefty consulting fee to come in and give you ideas that absolutely may create further wars in the world, and but we'll certainly give you some good headlines.
Exactly right.
Well, boys, we might take a bit of a break, JR. We'll let you get back to all the magic that happens behind the cameras and doing what you do and working overtime to make Brody, myself, Lockie and Co all look as good as you can. Broads, we'll give you a spell and we might come back, and I know you've got some cricket and some biffs and some other things to talk about later in the show.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, we've sent Brody and JR off to the locker room, and it's time to dig into, for the first time on the Chris McPherson Show, a bit of rugby league and really getting into it and pulling it apart as a panel session. We've been scouring the globe for some of the best talent. We couldn't quite find it, so instead we've settled for a man who's well known to a number of us throughout the show, Adam Martin from the Talking Parra podcast. Ads, mate, welcome to the Chris McPherson Show.
Thanks for having me. I think you're underselling that. You actually rang me up and said, look, they're the most knowledgeable person I can find, and you've come straight to him, so it worked out perfectly, didn't it, for you?
Well, yeah, we won't talk about how many people we went through to get to you, but we're here now, mate. Look, we know there's going to be a blue and yellow bias on anything you give us today, so that's okay. And including that is, that monstrosity of a structure. I will give you, it is one of the best grounds in Australia to watch footy at. You're at Combank Stadium, mate. You're getting set for the Parra AGM. You've got a big day ahead of you, so we do appreciate you giving us a bit of time to have a look with the NRL season right upon us.
Yeah, no worries. Yep. It's busy couple of weeks as we lead into the season, but can't wait for it to start.
Yeah, what a time of year it is. Let's dig into it, mate. Let's talk. We're calling it top tips to start with. Let's have a look at the season as a whole. We're going to be focused on Vegas for a big chunk of this segment, but where do you see the season coming out? What are the headlines you see coming out of the season? The winners, the prize performers, both good and bad, individuals, teams. What have you pulled apart already?
Yeah, it's a hard one this year. Like, there's a lot of hype around a couple of teams that I just don't quite get. Like, I'll start with that. Like, there's a lot of Brisbane hype. I know they obviously just won the preseason challenge. They won that last year as well. I'm not getting the hype around Brisbane. A lot of people have them finishing the top four and stuff. I just can't see it. Like, I think, and this could come back to bite me, so sorry to Brisbane fans if I offend you early in the season, but their halves, like aging halves, we've seen Reynolds struggle in the last couple of years for match fitness and injuries. Ben Hunt was wonderful at St George last year, but it's where he kind of ends up when Ezra Mann returns as well. I'm not getting that. South Sydney hype as well. I think that's kind of died down after a couple of injuries and some trial form, but the hype was there just because of the coach as well. I think it's a very open season. You never want to write Penrith off. They've lost players once again, but looking through that team, they're still like $1.60 favourites this week as well. With a completely different backline, a very much reshuffled backline when you look at their centres and their wingers there for this week. And Melbourne bouncing back. I think Melbourne will struggle early on. I'm not just saying that because they play Parramatta, but off a bit of a grand final hangover, Munster having a double hip surgery and returning. I think Melbourne will be the team to beat this year. I just think it'll take them a little bit of time to become that team to beat. You can never write off Melbourne as it is. Teams are going to struggle. The Roosters, I think the Roosters will massively fall, and I'm not just saying that because the Knights smacked them. I don't have the Roosters playing finals football this year. I don't have the Knights playing finals football this year. That's no surprise to anyone because we know how much I hate the Knights. But I guess Kalen Ponga kind of proved again on the weekend. They're so reliant on Ponga. If Ponga has another one of those wonderful years, look, the Knights could finish top four, but I think teams are going to shut him down, and I can see them finishing, outside the 8 as well. And it's a hard one to predict. Like, we'll talk about my own team quickly, and same thing. We rely on Mitchell Moses. New coach, no pressure, but if Mitchell Moses stays on the field, we could be a top 4 team. If Mitchell Moses doesn't, we could be a bottom 4 team. It's a hard season, and I guess the only 2 teams I'll guarantee. So 3 teams I'll guarantee will play finals football. Be Penrith, Melbourne, and Cronulla. Cronulla once again with a pretty easy draw. Cronulla will play finals football.
And in terms of the other end, you obviously talked about, you saw Newcastle and the Roosters missing it, a team that, is probably talked up in terms of some of their ins and outs in the off-season. I think they're probably one of the absolute outsiders for the Premiership, the Dragons. Are they a side that you can see improving? Who do we see as the big improvers from last year?
Oh, the Tigers. Once they get it all together, and it's not going to happen overnight, but the Tigers certainly won't be playing in a spoon bowl against Parramatta this year. I can't see them playing finals football, but a successful year for the Tigers is finishing in that 9th to 12th. They can somehow sneak into the 8. And they've got the foundations there now. They've got the good young players coming through. They've brought in some more experience. It's interesting you mentioned St George as well, because St George were thereabouts last year to play finals football, and they just fell into a bit of a heap at the end of the year. And I think the Ben Hunt loss is too much. I know they've added the experience of Gutho and Cook, but we saw Gutho struggle last year. Cook's getting on. I know he's a beach sprinter, but he's getting on. Sorry, I had to get that in. But I can't see St George featuring anywhere near the finals. I don't think they've shown enough in the trials. They won't be down the bottom of the table. I've got them in that 9th to 12th kind of period as well.
It's going to be an interesting one. As you say, there's a lot of openness. I think we'll know a lot more once we sort of get a few weeks into the season. I'm with you. I think we're going to see 2 of the top sides in Penrith and Cronulla go around in Vegas, and we'll get to that. And I did love the stat, you talked Brisbane before, that no one's ever won the preseason challenge and then gone on to make the 8. So it's such a long and storied history of the preseason challenge of 2 seasons, but well done Manly and Brisbane. But Brisbane could do it back to back. So it's certainly going to be interesting. Are you prepared to put the cojones on the line, mate, and give someone the WM that doesn't wear blue and gold?
No, because Mitchell Moses will get it. No, it's a bit of a hard one to predict. Like, I've obviously got Melbourne up there, so it'd be hard to go past Hughes, obviously getting it again. But it's when you look at these top teams, like, I guess Cleary losing Luai could potentially, but then Isaiah Yeo takes points off him. So many of the top teams, because they're so dominant, they just turn around and actually, the top players take points off other players. So it probably won't be one of the top 4 teams that actually wins it, the Dally M, when you look at players. This is going to seem like a really weird prediction because I've got him down the bottom of the table, but he didn't deserve to win it the year he won it. But is there a chance that Kalen Ponga wins it? And we know how much I hate the Knights, but if the Knights are to finish anywhere from 5th to 13th, Kalen Ponga has to be playing his best football every week, and he has to be on the field. So there's a big chance that Kalen Ponga could take out the Dally M. Honourable mention, Reece Walsh as well.
Interesting with Ponga. We know that the judges tend to have certain players who their eye is drawn to more often than not, and Kalen's one of those. And that's where I'm going to go with my tip. And We talked about the Sharks going well. Someone that we know polls really well is Adam Fanua-Blake. He's historically polled really well. The Sharks don't have a huge number. Like obviously, Nico Hines will take some votes from him if they perform well. But if they finish top 4, then there's got to be someone taking some significant votes alongside Nico and possibly even taking them from him. We know what he can bring. If he plays his best football there, I think he could be a nice little smoky there. It's been a while since we've had, an out-and-out prop. I think Taumalolo is probably the last middle-ish player that's really won it. So it's going to be interesting. As you say, I think it's a really open market too. It's very much going to depend on who can get the runs on the board in terms of performance from their team, as you say, but also who doesn't get their key votes stolen from them by another teammate. And the Broncos will be an interesting one, as you say. Walsh certainly catches the eye, but Walker, does Reynolds take the points from him there and Mam and the likes of that in some of those standout performances?
Yeah, I think with Walsh, I've got Reynolds not playing, the majority of the season again. I had the same prediction last year and it kind of come true. We saw Jock Madden come and play quite a few games there as well. Like with Walsh, you obviously got Reynolds and Hunt. Yeah, you're right. It's a catch-22, isn't it? Like you can have the best season of your life, but so can the blokes around you. I think the Rookie of the Year is another interesting one as well. There's some really good rookies coming through. Some rookies maybe not even named this week, but like I could predict you a Rookie of the Year and I'd put me money on it tomorrow he's going to win it. So, and that's Isaiah Iongi from Parramatta. I've seen enough of him in the trials. I saw enough of him debut against Newcastle playing for Penrith to say that he will win the Rookie of the Year quite comfortably.
All right, you've heard it here first. Put your hard earned on it and then rock up at Adam Martin's door to chase him down if it doesn't happen. Now that the wise bookmakers have heard that, mate, they'll have him at $1.01. So, speaking of rookies and people looking to impress, the NRL heads to Vegas this week, and that's where we get underway. But before that happens, there's a Nines tournament, and there's the NRL Combine. We're going to see 50 athletes from across the world representing a range of sports for the chance to earn an NRL contract. First of all, is this legit, or is it just going to be a gimmick just to get some more headlines? What do you think?
Yeah, well, apparently it's legit, but like, I don't know, like a lot of it's made up of the American Rugby League teams. Like I know they're trying to probably attack some NFL stars to try and give it a go and stuff like that, because obviously by calling it the NRL Combine, then, they're looking to attract those kind of players, but they're pretty much attracting, and I mean this very respectfully, the game in America is strong. I've watched some of the highlights, obviously, on Instagram and stuff of the game over there. And I think every single one of our Newcastle Rugby League clubs, including the shirt you're wearing, would go over and beat those teams, playing in America. It's just not a strong competition. I know they've recruited well. Like the Port Titans team hasn't recruited well. They've got that coward in the headgear going over to play for them. But most teams have recruited well, and they've obviously flown some players over. And it's a fantastic opportunity, obviously, to go across there and play in another country. But whether the next NRL star will come from that, like I bagged him out, but someone like, Mr. Headgear probably will stand out in that kind of arena as well. And let's see if he gets another opportunity.
Yeah, well, from our broader sports audience, there's a young man, Matt Sovalala, who plays in the Newcastle competition. So that's who you're referring to. So that's obviously the nines competition. We've got that combine though as well. Like looking through, as you said, there's a lot of sevens players playing in that, a lot of American women's sevens players and rugby internationals. So it'd be interesting to see what that standard's like. We've got, some Division 1 college footballers and lacrosse players. So it's going to be interesting to see how they come across. And yeah, it's certainly, there's no names jumping out where you're going, wow, this is, a phenomenal opportunity. But it's no different to the NFL's international player program, I suppose. And we saw, again, speaking of the Newcastle Knights and the Newcastle Rugby League, Latia Mothadarike, former North Queensland Cowboy, has transitioned into their international program. So maybe they find a diamond in the rough, so to speak. But 25 men and women are going to get their chance to, put their best foot forward, and 4 of them will get to essentially have a train and trial contract or a version thereof. So another little, I guess, string to the bow of what is happening in Vegas. As we said, we've got the Nines there as well, but it's all going to build, Adam, towards the main event, which is the 4 teams from Australia, the international match for the women's, and the 2 teams from the UK playing 4 games in Vegas. They're talking 50,000 crowd. They're talking that there's going to be more Americans there. In terms of this being a success, what does that look like for the NRL? Is it just about getting more bums on seats and more Americans? Is it just a nice jaunt for everyone involved, including all those people that are associated with the Nines and everything else that's going on? Or what's the measure here? Is there a measure for success?
The measure of success is TV views over there. The more TV views they can get in actual America itself is what it's all about. Like, we know Australians are going to be tuning in. Australians tune in, obviously, when the game's here. Bums on seats, I guess, is not the biggest thing. Like, yes, it adds to the spectacle. The more crowds you have there, obviously, the better the atmosphere, and there's more likely people are to tune in and watch. But it's all about the TV deals. And if they get the TV deal sorted, they get the betting companies on board over there. And just to get into, obviously, that kind of the betting companies in America, that's where the millions of dollars are going to be made for the NRL.
Yeah, I agree. The betting companies and TV, we know that similar to the NFL, rugby league, because of its linear nature and the rectangle field, it's so well suited to TV viewing, unlike some of our other codes that we compete with here. And that's where the money is in America, because if you can get on TV, you can get betting, as you said, and tie in. And betting's certainly continue to develop in the American market in recent years, we know. So we'll watch and wait and see how that shapes up. In terms of the games, though, let's have a look at that slate. Let's start with the Test match. How do you see the women's Test match shaping up? There was obviously a lot of talk about the Gillaroos camp getting cancelled in the lead up and different things. Are the Aussies just going to be too good?
Yeah, they'll be too strong for England. Look, the English game's growing massive in the women's. It's starting to see a couple of players come across to Australia from that as well. But I think they're going to be way too strong for them there, the Gillaroos.
And then Vegas has got a Super League game as well. Wigan taking on Warrington. We saw some bizarre results in the first round of the Super League the other week. A 1-0 game, and I think it was 80-something to nil game. We had the real extremes. These are two of the better teams in terms of the competition over there. This one will be a humdinger as well. These guys will take the opportunity to be involved in part of it, and really, I think they're going to relish it. Yeah,
it's a massive opportunity. I hope it grows. Like, I'm looking forward to 2026 already. I'm a Leeds fan. Obviously, we know I'm a Parramatta fan, so there's probably a 98% chance that Parramatta will be there. I'm hoping Leeds are there as well, because that could be huge. Leeds are one of the most followed teams in the Super League. But just in regards to that game, I think Wigan will probably be a little bit too strong in that regard for that game.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's turn our focus to games 2 and 4, because it will be the Super League kicking it off, which aligns with their time slot. We'll then go into the Raiders and the Warriors. These are two teams that have, they've had probably different off seasons. Certainly know in recent times the Raiders have found a little bit of drama over there. Hudson Young and Morgan Smithies, couple of big boys just getting into a bit of brouhaha, just keeping them on edge while they're over there, mate. Is there anything to take from that, first of all?
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Boys will be boys, won't they? So, nothing much in it. It seemed like a bit of a beat up. Look, I'm surprised we made a few last year without a drama, to be honest, because as soon as you send, doesn't matter if they're rugby league players or whatever, if you send 23, 25 human beings to Vegas in a group, there's going to be some kind of drama. I don't know how we escaped last year or how it got covered up last year, but look, obviously a distraction in the game, but I think there was nothing in it. But let's just leave it at that and learn their lesson. And they'll be on the naughty list with Peter Blandys for a while, and they kind of won't go to Vegas next year anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think you're bound to get a loose bloke from the Upper Hunter Valley and a loose bloke from the north of England who are good mates and had a couple of beverages. Maybe it's probably bound to happen. But anyway, it was an inflatable bat, not too much to talk about. Danny Widler got himself in plenty of shots on the way through and kept growing his image in the US and Australia. So someone's had a win out of it in the end of the day. And yeah, as you say, it's probably a bit of a beat up, and everyone will have forgotten about it in 6 months when there's been 4 more rugby league scandals. It's the joys of the wonderful game that we're in. So in terms of this game, though, teams are out now. We can have a look at that, and how do you see this one shaping up? It's the Raiders, are almost fully fit in terms of their squad. Just Zach Hosking not available. A few more out of action in terms of the Warriors. Probably the most notable for them is Delamartini-Zalesniak, but as we know, the Warriors have a production line of outside backs.
Yeah, I'm surprised by the actual market for this one. No one kind of knows what to expect for the Raiders. I think that's kind of the case every year. You'd obviously know that best yourself, but I don't know how they're outsized. I see the Warriors struggling, especially early on without the presence of Sean Johnson guiding around the park. So I've got the Raiders winning this one. It's funny when you put your score predictions. I've got them winning by about 12 to 14. So I think they'll actually do it quite easy, because the Warriors are one of the teams I do have in that bottom 3, bottom 4 this year.
Yeah, they're a team that's always hard to get a measure on, the Warriors. I unsurprisingly have the Raiders getting it done. I think, again, as you said, just betting down that new halves combination for the Warriors is going to be an interesting piece. And obviously losing Adam Fanua-Blake, it's a direct swap for James Fisher-Harris realistically, but there's been a bit of change there. So we'll see how they take to it. But the main event, essentially on Las Vegas game night as it is, it'll be 3:30 Sunday Eastern time for Australia. It's 8:30 over there. Is Penrith versus Cronulla. You talked about them before. You expect them to be two of the sort of top 3 to 4 teams. Penrith have certainly had quite a few players leave this year, but they've still got quite a lot of good players in their ranks. You've only got to look through that team list. Edwards, Cleary, Martin and Yeo to start with. 4 massive names. It's going to be betting down this new halves combination for Penrith, while for Cronulla, it's, they bring in Adam Fanua-Blake, and you expect that they're probably going to go another level in terms of where they were last year.
Yeah, 100%. Look, you can never write off Penrith. Every time they seem to lose a player, they seem to find another one. They seem to make it work. And I was looking through that Penrith team that, I guess, their backline, like Luke Garner in the centres, obviously with Tago. Looking at the wings, Alamotti on the wing. The other wing was McLean, who's obviously a young up-and-coming player, but Cole at 5'8". Got the nod over to Lungy. I can't look past Cronulla. I know I'm going for 2 roughies straight away, and I haven't really given this one a lot of thought, but I just think Cronulla looks stronger across the park. And I know Penrith, I'll never write them off. They'll be one of the teams they're in, so will Cronulla, but I think Cronulla can upset Penrith in Vegas in this first round.
It's going to be interesting. As you said, Cole there, we know that there's some asterisks on Cleary's being fully healthy with his shoulder, and Dylan Edwards as well, both reportedly having some niggles. So that will be interesting to watch. Both obviously been named. We don't expect them not to play. But the one for me, I'm intrigued to see the impact using Dane Laurie off the bench is going to have for Penrith. That could be either absolutely diamonds or absolutely dust for mine.
Yeah, same thing. I can't see where he can come in. Obviously they've signed Blaze Tulungi, for example, as a 5'8", but someone like him would have been better on the bench. He can come and play 5'8", he can play fullback, he can play centres, he can play wing. Laurie, I know he can play 5'8", but I wouldn't call him an out-and-out 5'8". He's pretty much covering on to play fullback and maybe float around lock to see his hands on the ball. Yeah, you'll never question Ivan Cleary's madness, will you? Because anything he seems to touch turns to gold. But, it is a bit of a strange one.
Certainly is. We'll see how that all plays out for him. It's going to be an interesting space to watch. But the best thing is Rugby League is back. I know Adam's pumped. I'm certainly pumped. And if getting your little fix of Rugby League here wasn't enough for you, you can go and get a very blue and yellow biased opinion on the Talking Parra podcast. And if they want a bit of a less biased one, mate, you also pop up on the League of Inches one as well. Yeah,
I'm actually not doing that one this year. So Parramatta one got too much. It's kind of become a full-time job. So look, obviously that with Joel, who was part of my Talking Parra as well. We're still good mates, but just couldn't find the time to fit it all in. The content and the Parramatta. I'm doing 2 Parramatta shows this year, which you'll be joining one of them later in the year when we preview the game against Canberra, which actually twice you'll be on. So I look forward to that. And it's been massive growth, but I'm realistic with Parramatta this year. I'm realistic, unsure. I've been to training and I've seen how much better things are. It's like a new coat of paint on an old house, but I also know we're probably one big injury away from it all coming unraveling. So I'm excited for the season. I'm in Melbourne for round 1 and hoping to break that streak.
We hope, we pray, we do all those things. We cling to those key players so desperately, and that's what makes the anticipation ever the sweeter as we head into Rugby League season. But thank you very much, mate. We'll make sure to link the Talking Parra podcast down in the notes below, and look forward to chatting Rugby League with you throughout the season, undoubtedly.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. Hopefully next time I'm not sitting on my phone and I won't look like I don't know what I'm doing with my head, that's for sure. So sorry for those who've had to stare at my head all over the place.
Well, moving on from the egg-shaped ball to the spherical one, it is time to bring back Mr. Consistent. He's here. He's always delivering. Lachie Avil, good to have you back.
Thanks, Chris. Round ball's right there if you want it, but I guess spherical works as well.
Of course, Round Ball Australia, the home of Lachlan Avil. Carves away day in, day out to bring everyone all their football news alongside a wonderful team. There's been a lot happening in football, Lachie, but as we do and as we have been in recent weeks, let's start with the A-Leagues and the A-League's Fast 5. I think there's nowhere else to start but at the top of the table. Auckland taking the bragging rights in New Zealand. They got the the Prime Minister's vote. I need to get the right title for their head of state, but the Prime Minister's vote in terms of his team, they've absolutely hammered Wellington. Have they won the Premier's Plate already as well?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Almost. I'm not willing to go 100% just yet, but this weekend when we eventually have a look at the fixtures, they're playing Adelaide, who are in second at home. So for me, that's the game. If they can win that, then I think we can pretty safely say that the Premier's Plate is locked up in Auckland for season 24-25, and what a season it's been for them. The third win against the Phoenix. They've done the complete sweep in the derbies this season, which is remarkable. And then a 6-1 scoreline here to boot. Nader Moreno, who's pictured there, had a hat trick on the day. It's actually been since officially taken away from him. There was a little deflection, I think, onto Rogerson or something. So he might have a hat trick or something as well. It's like flips between the two players. But anyway, a very dominant team performance. They've been exceptional all year. Still have to win, probably 3 games of football in the final series if they want to go on and win the championship, where, anything can happen. But in terms of the regular season, no one's been as consistent as them, and they definitely deserve to be where they are.
They certainly do, and it's not going to be an easy place to come to the final series. We've seen the crowds they're drawing, the atmosphere they're building, and what they've built overall. It was absolutely packed out on the weekend. They're continuing to, have a really strong appearance at home. So, as you say, there's going to be games to win. There's going to be efforts that are needed, but if they finish top of the ladder, they give themselves the best chance, and potentially we see a grand final in New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they're going to get there, they get through their semi-final, they will host it. And they've had incredible support from the people of Auckland all season. Both of the derbies they've had there have sold out. They've probably sold out maybe 2 other games, I want to say, the season opener and then maybe one other. So there's going to be at least 25 to 27,000. They seem to have kept increasing the capacity of that stadium every time they've played there. So I hate to see what the final number will be, but yeah, a great opportunity for them, absolutely.
Got those old school soccer stories of, a ground that you drive past and it looks like a suburban ground, and they tell you about how once upon a time, some sort of cup game in the UK, they had 48,000 people. No bigger than my lounge room. It's phenomenal. It's great to see, and it's a great football story, and long may it continue. As much as it's, we like to see the Aussie sides doing well, it's a really cool story.
Absolutely. Yep. I think to come in as an expansion team like this, obviously the Wanderers came in and did the same thing, won the premiership, but that's the bar that Auckland are trying to beat, and to do it as a Kiwi side is quite incredible given, their position and how the player eligibility rules work and things like that. So incredible for them, and it makes it interesting because they can't qualify for the Asians Champions League Elite as well. The fact that spot then moves down to second place, which is going to be incredibly competitive between probably 6 or 7 teams to finish in that second spot, makes the drama of the end of the season all the more entertaining.
Yeah, we'll have a bit of a peek at the ladder in a moment, but I guess from that point of view, as you say, it's quite clustered. And realistically, like right now, there's 6 points separating second to 8th. We talked about Macarthur and their dramas last week, but there's teams with extra games in hand. So, and especially with Auckland hosting Adelaide this weekend, if Auckland are to win that, well, there'll be a much more significant gap between first and second, and there might be between even second and 9th or 10th, depending on other results. The bizarre situation, considering how hotly contested 1 and 2 were only a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So if Auckland win this game, they're going to be, at worst, 10 points clear of second place with a game in hand, which is absolutely bananas, right? Because someone will probably likely jump above Adelaide, and it's remarkable to be this far ahead. Obviously, it's because this middle pack is so congested, as you say, which makes it really entertaining down there. But it's like watching the F1, right? It's Max Verstappen's been winning quite easily for a little while now. Maybe things are changing soon in that world, but here it's all about the mid pack. That's what we're interested in.
Well, we don't have to pay per mention on Max Verstappen. He already got a run earlier in the show. In terms of other spots on the ladder, 2 teams that have interested me, obviously, no surprises, the Newcastle Jets, 3 in a row, the first time since 2017-18. I was saying when we were off air before, it was quite fun on ground. Point out to Clayton Taylor that he was 12 or 13 years of age last time that happened, which made him do a double take when you think about how young some of these players are the Jets are rolling out. But also Western United, they're on the move. They're up to 3rd on the ladder. On goal difference in front of Melbourne Victory at the moment, and certainly not locked into that. It's a congested pack behind them. But they're two sides that are really heading in the right direction. Another one, probably Western Sydney Wanderers. And if you look at the ladder, Western United and Western Sydney Wanderers are the top teams in their city.
Yeah, you're not wrong. For me, the Wanderers and the Jets, those are the two bolters that we really need to keep our eyes on. Wanderers for that kind of top end finals, top 2 spot. They've been incredibly inconsistent all season, but they've kind of just in the last month steadied their form. They're undefeated in their last 4, 3 wins and a draw, and they've really kind of shown that consistency that a lot of people have been asking of them, and that's come at a really good time heading in towards the back end of the season. So because of how tight everything is, they're still more than capable of finishing in the top 2. Top 4 even would be great from where they started. And then the Jets, they're pushing to make finals, only 7 points behind. It is still going to be tough for them, but they're undefeated in their last 5. Auckland's the only other team that can say that. So there are positive signs, but that game against Auckland, which will come in 2 weeks because the Jets have the bye here, but that's going to be a very big test for them. Can they get through that? And even if they do lose that game, which they probably will, the Auckland are a very good side, can they bounce back for that from that afterwards and continue their run? That's going to be the real test.
Even with that Auckland game, they've got their destiny in their own hands from here, right? That's the thing. They're not already at a point where they absolutely need other results. They've just got to keep on winning as many of their games as they can. And it'll be an interesting story. If they were to knock off Auckland, that would be a huge, statement point, because then they would have knocked off essentially what are currently 3 of the top 4 sides, because they've knocked off Adelaide and Melbourne Victory in recent weeks. So we'll see what comes of that. Teams trending in the other direction. 2 teams coming off Asian football, the Central Coast Mariners and Sydney, will be very disappointed with the displays they put up on the weekend.
Yeah, I saw this coming out of Sydney. They were always going to struggle this game against Perth. They played 120 minutes in midweek in that second leg tie of the round of 16 in the Asian Champions League 2 to get past Bangkok. In very sweaty, humid, hot conditions. There was players cramping all over the place. Fitness was always going to be a massive concern. So I don't think dropping points in that game was a massive surprise. It's, can you now respond to that? You've got an interesting game against Macarthur, which has a history of red cards as well. If that goes against you, then playing with 10 men is never easy against a full side. So that's going to be tough for them. And of course, they've got their minds focused on that quarterfinal that's coming up against Jeonbuk Hyundai as well. So lots of stuff going on for Sydney FC to keep track of at the moment. Again, the benefit is because everyone seems to be dropping points around them, they can afford to drop a game here or there, but only 1 win in their last 5 is not where they'd want to be. So they have to pick up the pace. And then you're right, the Mariners, hopefully just the mental load of being out of the Champions League elite can just refresh this team. We saw, they've been knocked out for like 4 months mathematically, but they've still had this hanging over their shoulders and the shadows on the wall. They know they have to go and probably just lose 2 more games and just kind of get it out of the way. But now that their focus can be entirely on the league, hopefully that acts as a bit of a mental refresh for them, and they can, hopefully put together a little bit of good form, because again, they're still not that far away. If they really wanted to, they could make it.
Yeah, they certainly have some work to do, but again, season not over. Good news for them, they broke their run of draws. I'm not sure if they'll play after a 4-0 loss. You touched on it. Let's have a look ahead to this weekend in the A-League men's. And you talked on that crucial Sydney, what I'm calling the Sydney non-derby, versus Macarthur. Macarthur in all sorts, but they are still nipping at the heels of Sydney, so Sydney can't go into this one complacent.
No, they can't. I think MacArthur's exits, we can add on Valencia Man now to all the people they lost in the January transfer window. They won't have their 1 or 2 under-20s back as well for this game, so they are very light on players. So I would expect Sydney FC to do a number on them, to be perfectly honest with you. It's probably a case of, can Philip Curto have a good enough game to keep them in it for long enough to make an impact? So I see Sydney as the clear favourites, but I think this round has a very interesting dynamic with it as a whole, because you have, that game Macarthur-Sydney, which is very tight on the table, obviously Auckland and Adelaide, even though I think those games will actually be rather one-sided, very close jostling for positions, right? But every other game, you've got the teams in that 3 to 6 bracket playing the bottom four of the competition. So I think every single one of these games has a clear team that should come out on top. And then it just becomes about, can you beat the teams that you're supposed to beat? Because for teams in that middle pack, it's, the Wanderers are the best example. They just haven't been beating the teams that they are supposed to beat until the last month or so. It's been, I don't know whether it's complacency or you can just point to the general balance of the league. But if you've got 3 or 4 ladder positions on someone, you should go in on as the favourites and get the job done. And a lot of people have been struggling to do that, so they get another chance to prove that true this weekend.
Yeah, you touch on that top of the table clash. I feel we've been a little bit robbed. It'd been nice to have it maybe 4 weeks ago, Adelaide and Auckland, but I feel the result might have been still somewhat similar. I did notice Jacob from Ramble Australia sending through in the group chat. Auckland have fired some shots there, saying the circus is coming to town this weekend. They're straight on to Adelaide. They've been good with their social media game, Auckland, this year.
I don't know if I have to have another look at it. I'm not sure if they're actually having a crack at Adelaide or they are actually bringing a circus as kind of the on the side entertainment activity for the game. But yeah, you could read into it any way you like, I guess.
I'm not sure what they're going to do with their 36,000 fans at Beach and the port this year, but hey, they've done enormously well in terms of their fanning. They're wonderful. And look, as we said before, it's a great story. As you said, some of these games almost must win for Sydney. If you're dropping points here, especially the Mariners now unburdened, and admittedly a tough game, but Newcastle as well, coming for them, you would think they're both eyeing them off. Flips are going to hurt for teams above them. But the big round of football, there's some interesting games from Friday through Sunday. The other place there's some interesting football is the women's game. The Dub is back this week after the week off. It's going to be interesting to see. Western and Victory is probably the one that jumps out at me. Saturday, 6:00 twilight. It's it's a key clash and going to shape up well in terms of Victory needing 3 points to stay in touch with City at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. That's clearly the biggest game. 2 top 4 sides going at it. If City drop points, which is a massive if statement at this point, yes, they've had a couple of draws, but still undefeated on the season, then you got to keep touch. But for me, it's really jostling between each other. It's the same kind of position that we're in with the men's where, okay, if the premiers are going for it, great, but you want that top 2 because you want that bye to the semi-final. Even if you fall slightly short and you get in that 3 and 4 place, at least you get to host the elimination final. And that's essentially what's on the line here between Western United and Melbourne Victory is, those positions in the final series to give yourself the best chance of success. And it's remarkable to see how well Victorian football is doing really across the women's competition and the men's competition. It seems that it's a real hotbed at the moment. So it's sure to be a good game at Ironbark Fields. It's a very unique place to play football. Should be a good one.
Certainly will be. A couple other games that grab the eye as well. Obviously, Newcastle and Sydney just need to get some points. They've been horrific. 1 point in their last 5 games. They are shocking, so we'll see how they shape up. But Central Coast and Western Sydney were on the bottom of the table. Stone, motherless, loveless last 2 rounds ago. Now they've won 2 back-to-back. One of only 2 teams that have won their last 2 games alongside Melbourne City, so that'll be interesting. And Melbourne City and Canberra. Canberra undefeated in 5, making their way slowly up the ladder. If Central Coast slip on Friday night against the Wanderers side, Canberra might have the opportunity just to nab a couple of points and upset it and shock everyone.
If only they were playing anyone else but Melbourne City. You paint a nice picture there, Chris, but just the other badge that's sitting in the away slot there for Saturday afternoon's fixture, it's just such a mighty opposition. You'd love to dream to be the team that knocks them off the perch and puts the 1 in the loss column, but there's no way you can go into a game for the rest of the season and not tip Melbourne City as the favourites.
Certainly not. It will be an interesting game, though, probably robbed of a bit of star power because as we'll transition on in a moment, I can't imagine the Matildas are going to be back despite how fast Paramount's commentators travel. I don't think the Matildas players are going to be travelling in time for Saturday afternoon. And that probably wraps our Fast Five and transitions us nicely into other stories. As I said, it's been a massive week in football. And let's start. You touched on some players being absent for a couple of clubs in the men's. The Aussie under-20s, they've qualified through to the under-20s World Cup by making it through to the semi-finals. Take us through this. It didn't look like it was going to be the case at partway through this game.
Yeah, they had to come from behind twice, the young Socceroos against Iraq. Some absolute belting goals in this game. It's well worth a watch of the 3-minute highlights if you haven't seen them. Alex Badalatu, who you can see on your screen, scored the winner, a volley out of midair, kind of like karate kick to put it in the back of the net and send the young Socceroos to the World Cup. It was extraordinary. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. And if this kind of game had been associated with a senior team, it would be up there in the top 5 moments of Australian football of all time. It is still incredibly important for these kind of youth teams to make World Cups. It's a great development opportunity. It puts these players in the shop window. You know, there are clubs from all over the world. All the biggest clubs will be at this tournament scouting it for players, right? So it gets Australia in the face of the clubs that we want them to be in. And they've played such good football as well throughout this entire tournament. They shouldn't be stopping here, of course. They win the quarterfinal, so they go through now to play Japan in the semi, and then I believe it's Saudi Arabia and South Korea in the opposite semi-final as well. So all very powerful Asian footballing nations, but this team has been one of the most entertaining Australian national teams to watch over the past 5 years or so. So they have it in them to go all the way and lift an Asian Cup trophy, and that would be extraordinary to see them do.
They would be. They've broken a 12-year drought in qualifying for the World Cup, so we look forward to seeing how they go continued in the AFC Asian Cup, but also in the World Cup in coming times. Speaking of Asian Cups, Australia today have announced that they're going to throw their hat in the ring for the 2031 Asian Cup. Too much football on home soil is never enough, as we've talked about a number of times. We've got a proven track record hosting big events. How do we see it shape up, and what are the key takeaways from this very early in the nomination piece?
Yeah, obviously still very early, and there are still, a number of other bids that have been announced, or expressions of interest, I should say, that have been announced that we'd have to get through. But I think the big takeaway is just the show of intent from Football Australia to get these major tournaments to our shores is really exciting. If you think about the 6 major footballing tournaments that Australia has access to, we're going to now hopefully 3 of them have been confirmed, but 2 of them that we're bidding for could host them within the span of a decade, which is insane. We've had the Women's World Cup. We've got the Women's Asian Cup booked in. We're obviously bidding now for the Men's Asian Cup. The Club World Cup in 2029 has been rumoured a little bit to be part of the trade-off of us withdrawing from the 2034 World Cup bid was, okay, yeah, we get it, Saudi Arabia, this one's yours, but can we have a little bit of support for the Club World Cup in 29? So that's a distinct possibility. And if that comes true, you add in the Olympics, which to be fair is a Olympic Committee issue, not Football Australia issue, but from the women's side, that's a major tournament, right? So that is 5 of the 6. Just the Men's World Cup is the one that's missing. But we could feasibly have all of those tournaments within the span of a decade, as I said. So that is a great show of intent. And my belief, or hope at least, is that 10, 15 years down the line, when it comes to the conversation of having another bid for the Men's World Cup, obviously there are so many variables at play, but to have then successfully run all of those tournaments back to back to back to back to back, that would be a pretty good CV. And hopefully that collection of tournaments bodes well.
Certainly would be great, and hopefully we can land the 6th jewel in the crown if we can take the 5th along the way, and maybe a few underage World Cups or Asian Cups as well to throw into the mix to be further proof in the pudding of what we can do in terms of hosting. But let's move along, and finally, before we wrap up the football and excuse you for the evening so that you can rehydrate and rest up, the Matildas, they've shocked at the She Believes Cup. I'm not sure that the shock is a good shock, Lockie. 4-0 in the opening game to Japan. Some more positive signs in the second game against the US 2-1. They've still got the game against Colombia to come. But are we giving it a pass grade? Are we just saying that would fail?
Yeah, no, not even close to a pass grade for me. It's an emphatic fail. The game against Japan was just a calamity of errors. Personnel-wise, tactically, their mentality was clearly behind the 8 ball. it was the worst Matildas performance I've seen in probably my 5 or 6 years of watching the team very closely. It was bad, Chris. Mackenzie Arnold had a howler in net. There were a couple other individuals who you could probably point to. Hayley Razzo didn't have an amazing game. Claire Hunt had a massive error, which is very uncharacteristic for her. The way they were set up, they essentially played straight into Japan's hands. Japan pressed with the front four. They went man-to-man with our back four. The amount of times there was a square ball across to Alana Kennedy, she'd get pressured and just kick it out for a throw-in. Probably you couldn't count on your fingers, So they just had our number entirely and completely ran all the way through us. And the game against the US, the scoreline shows improvement. I don't know how much really there was. The Americans set up in a way that allowed us to get into the game a little bit more. We've always been a pretty good counter-attacking team. And the issue that Tony Gustafsson had in the last 2 years of his reign was that wasn't good enough when coming up against lower opposition. We couldn't break down a block and we couldn't progress the ball and hold possession. Well, the Americans were happy holding possession and we were actually able to attack on the counter, which is how we got our goal through Michelle Heyman. And they played essentially a third-string team as well. They were blooding a lot of fresh faces, and they still managed to score on us in 42 seconds and win the game 2-1. So the scoreline looks better. Our passing looked a little bit better through the midfield in the final third. We're a little bit more solid defensively, but also, again, I think the game allowed us to do that. So we've got one more against Colombia a little later this week. Hopefully we can at least get some points on the board and a win, which would be great for the mentality of this team, who are really in a bit of a limbo period until they get a new coach through the door. So until that happens, I don't really know where a whole lot of improvement is going to come from.
Yeah, you have to feel for Tom Samani, but we need a step up here. He's in a weird position. I certainly don't feel for him because he's the one at the helm now in terms of the results, but in terms of the awkward position he's in, I don't know what he can do to solve some of these things, but you have to think 3 points against Colombia is a minimum, which we'll know about by the time our viewers tune into this, because it is Thursday morning and we'll release that later on Thursday. So but in the meantime, I guess we just wait and see, and hopefully we see some positive shoots in this next game from the Matildas.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm probably feeling a little bit pessimistic on them at the moment, so I won't say too much more to get people's moods down. But yeah, hopefully we can see some improvement.
We'll wait and see. We'll watch on with bated breath and head into the A-League weekend. Hopefully it's a nice appetite whetter for the weekend. But Lockie, as always, if this wasn't enough, we were pretty comprehensive today, but head over to Roundball Australia. We've got all the podcasts, the written articles, the breakdowns each week as well. So there's lots of content over there. And as we say, too much football content's never enough. So thank you as always. And look forward to talking football with you again next week.
Cheers, Chris. Sounds good.
Well, moving on from the round ball to the red ball, we are going to pick apart all of the cricket action. And this week, joining us to cover the cricket is Brody Burrows. He's back from the Third Man Up podcast. And I just want to say off the top, Brody, this segment is not sponsored by the ICC or the BCCI.
No, and it's probably not the red ball either. If we're talking Champions Trophy, just about the white ball now, isn't it?
It is, mate. I'm still caught in Sheffield Shield mode. I've been enjoying it that much. I just keep thinking red ball and how much I can get amongst that. But as you say, it is the white ball. It is all Champions Trophy at the moment. And look, the headline is at the moment, one group's sorted out essentially, because we already know two teams that are going through as we record the Aussie-South Africa game sort of happening as we speak. New Zealand and India, though, they're all the way through. The hosts are out. But there's a bit of water still to go under the bridge in terms of games to come and Pool B being sorted out.
When you say the hosts are out, Zach, I thought India made it through, mate. Or you're talking Pakistan, the hosts on paper? Yeah,
we might unpack the host versus the real host in a moment. We might talk about, but let's shift our focus to Pool B for a moment. Obviously, Australia and South Africa got a win in their first game. We'll know more by the time we go live, but the winner of that game will book their spot through. Do you see them being the two sides that go through anyway? After what England dished up, just thinking you don't need any variety, you just bowl absolute wheels, and found out the hard way that an English-born Aussie will sort them out.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? England, who have made a history of the last 10 years of bringing West Indians, South Africans, New Zealand players in, gets beaten by someone from Australia, originally from Yorkshire. So just desserts, in my opinion. But yeah, look, I think The England team and what they dished up the other day, you could tell they thought they had that early. Mark Wood coming in, it was great to see him back fully fit, just as a cricket fan in general, bowling genuine wheels. But decks like that, they don't suit that kind of bowling. We've seen it time and time again, and you could have some sort of variety in there. But what a great knock it was by Josh Inglis at the same time. As well, Alex Carey, I mean, what can't that bloke do? He's the nicest guy in the world, can take out field screamers, can make runs for fun. I don't think there's a person in world sport in the world that can possibly hate Alex Carey. But yeah, these are the two sides in Australia and South Africa that I see definitely progressing to the next stage.
I certainly think there's a lot of people still in the ICC member, the MCC members, I should say. I've got the ICC on the brain. The MCC members that still don't like Alex Carey, but that's a whole other story, and it's all about morals apparently. It was a great win, as you say. The one thing I'm looking forward to is, if they've lost their mind at Josh Inglis being born in England and beating England, I can't wait till the three Curran brothers all team up for Zimbabwe and then roll them over in a few years to come in a one-day series.
Oh, that'll be excellent, won't it? But, another good one it was to see back playing some sort of cricket, and whether or not it is a bit of a preview of the Ashes next year. Jofra Archer, on a spicy Perth deck, having Wood, Archer, all in the one side. I think it's just going to be... It's a preview to what I think will be one of the best Ashes series coming up, especially with England probably having the better or the faster pace attack for the first time in a long time. But anyway, enough about the test and into the Champions Trophy.
Yeah, well, certainly. So it's going to be interesting to see. South Africa versus England is quite possibly going to be the decider. But if, as we said, we'll know by the time this show goes live whether if South Africa somehow pipped Australia, then it's going to be quite an interesting one as to how that all plays out. But we'll wait and see. The big talking point, as you said before, though, the paper host versus the real host, Pakistan. It was widely celebrated that an international cricket tournament going back to Pakistan, except for if you're India, because you don't have to play in Pakistan. Now, we understand there's political unrest. We understand all of these things. But at the end of the day, Pakistan were awarded the tournament. They shouldn't have lost out. And I think you gave us the quote last week, you can't spell BCCI without ICC. It was either yourself or Paul Dennett when we've had you on the show recently. But it's one of those pieces that this is just farcical. That Pakistan were the host of the tournament. We know they've been knocked out, but if they had have made it through alongside India, they would have had to play twice, including the final, off their own soil because of this. This is just, and I get that it's not in India, but it's just not right.
It's just ridiculous. Let's call it out for what it is. It's absolutely ridiculous. And it's one of those things. The BCCI rules world cricket. I don't care what everyone says. It's clear as daylight. This is what happens. This is the directive from them. And if you don't like it, well, too bad. You've got to deal with it. And it's political unrest. But at the same time, imagine a Virat Kohli 100 in Pakistan. Imagine what that would do for his legacy. His legacy is already great. One of the best three format players. But at the same time, why is it always that the world of cricket, I get that's where the money comes from. Why is it that it has to revolve around India? No matter whether the other one's always getting consulted on pitches. The other one getting consulted on home grounds. This doesn't suit them. This doesn't suit them. Toughen up. This is why a nation so big continues, or they should be dominating world cricket consistently, but they just flat out always have it their own way. And sorry, I've come off the long run here, mate, but until they learn to just suck up some sort of just things that doesn't go their way, they'll never be the true number one across all three formats.
I agree. We should have put you on the soapbox today and let you tee off, mate. That might be future, I think. But yeah, it's interesting because you look back at it and India, basically they're guaranteed if they make it all the way through, they'll play all 5 games at the one venue. The best case that any other country can hope for is maybe Australia and England if the draws fall the right way and they don't get India in the semi-final and India gets knocked out and they play in the final. They could have 4 games potentially at a venue, but realistically most likely 3 depending on how it shapes up because they can't both do that. So it's a bizarre situation that essentially a team could win the tournament not playing in their own, not playing in the venue that has won the hosting rights. What's next for India? They get there and they go, oh, well, we only want to play in Perth when we come to Australia, or we're going to play the next Border Gavaskar Trophy, but we want to play at our away series in New Zealand. it's bizarre. It's absolutely mind-boggling. We go back to around the grounds. Imagine if Canada or the USA refused to play the other one in ice hockey because there's some political tension. I know historically it's a bit different. It's a bit more severe, but it's one of those pieces. If you're not happy with playing there, then don't attend the tournament.
Exactly right. And I think cricket and sport in general is such a good way to unite countries. We saw Australia and India. Yes, there was banter on the field. Yes, there was banter in the crowds. But how many times did you see an Australian sitting next to an Indian fan, sitting there all day, talking cricket with one another? Sometimes sport goes the other way. Yes, it can create unrest, but sometimes it brings people, sometimes it brings nations together. Why not try and buy into it? Why not try and bring that and bring two nations who are so passionate about the one game? Why not try and mend relations with cricket?
Yeah, I agree. I think the ICC and all that are involved have missed a trick by not already finding an India and Pakistan test on neutral soil to start this conversation. And again, I know it takes away from this, but again, if you have a concern about a team's ability to host another team in the top tier, then they shouldn't be able to play in that tournament. And it should be the same. If India can't host Pakistan, well, then they shouldn't be able to host that tournament. Politically, it's not safe for us to bring all of our other member nations to you. So just like we wouldn't give it to Afghanistan now because a number of nations would have concerns, then this is the case. We saw it with the women's cricket. They moved the tournament. Again, don't award those tournaments to those countries, and it creates a really disappointing situation where Pakistan have made all these strides coming forward. But it is what it is, mate. We did see a little bit of karma, though. Rohit Sharma dropping an absolute dolly for Axar Patel. I know you've got some fairly strong thoughts here on a couple of points on this front.
Yeah, definitely. Rohit Sharma, surely he's got less than 6 months left in world cricket. Still not doing too bad at times, but India have that much talent coming through their ranks. I think the best thing for him would have been to step aside before this tournament, and not long after he retired from the Test arena. I think that's probably the best time for him to go out. But dropping off to Axar Patel, I think it's just desserts. If Kuhneman's getting looked at for his action, come on. It's 100% bent. Yes, it straightens once after it reaches once it goes past the shoulder, but it's a bit of a dodgy looking action. And of course, we won't see or hear anything about it. We all know why, but it just creates unrest when there's, a rule for thee, but not for me. Unfortunately, until we get just evenness across the board, it's every trophy that India win, especially if they win this one, it's going to be tainted, as much as I hate to say it.
Look, it's hard to disagree with you. It's very questionable. Undoubtedly, if they do test him, they'll change the rules like they did once before. But anyway, that wasn't India. That was more broadly for bums on seats in another part of the world. But, mate, there's plenty happening in the cricket space. One thing that I can't let go as, you as a proud Crow eater and me as a proud Blue. Mate, the Sheffield Shield table, 1 and 2, mate. South Australia, New South Wales. Let's have the final already.
Yep, I reckon, mate. And let's go there and 4-day drinking session. And whoever comes out on top, I'm sure it won't be us one way or another. And the way South Australia have been batting, it'll probably only go 2 days anyway. But at least the bowlers are kicking into gear.
Yeah, they certainly are. Jason Sanger keeps top scoring, an ex-New South Welshman, while we're talking about ex-people doing good things.
Penny Manenti.
Yeah, well, yeah, correct. Mate, they're trading spots, a few of these boys. But the last thing, mate, I just want to know is at what point is Ryan Harris going to be appointed Premier of South Australia?
Oh, I tell you what, the big man's an absolute star, isn't he? Dizzy couldn't even turn around South Australia, and then Big Rhino comes in and brings a bunch of second stringers from around Australia and turns them into great cricketers. But it is a great thing for the comp. It's no longer West Australia. It's it's South Australia at the moment. It's New South Wales, a new look New South Wales, you could probably say as well, with a lot of youngsters coming through. And I think just watching a lot of Sheffield Shield this year, there's a lot more interest in it that I think I'd probably, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, no one was watching it. No one was giving it any attention. And then now suddenly, especially with an ageing Australian side, I think that's gained a lot more attention to the Sheffield Shield. And there's a lot more now. I'd feel confident in bringing up 5 or 6 players straight into the side and knowing that they will perform. You've got the likes of Michael Neser running around. You've got Sam Constas, obviously not playing the test, who's, let's say, he is the appointed next gen, but Another one, Nathan McAndrew, taking absolute poles for fun. Jake Weatherald moved down to Tasmania, the leading run scorer for the year. Matty Renshaw, all these players, could come into this Australian side. And we've seen it with Alex Carey. We've seen it with Josh Englers. They've brought in strong Sheffield Shield form into international cricket, and it's holding up.
It certainly is. And, we've got lots of players that are starring. The competition's heating up. And I think the other thing is, South Australia obviously a little bit clear, but the rest of the teams all still with, we're getting to the pointy end of the season. I think everyone's got 2 games to play. Everyone is still within a chance of making the final. It's a red hot competition. I think there's essentially one result separating 2nd through 6th. So we're loving it. Lots of good performances, lots of young stars, and a few old stars too. Jackson Bird became the 5th player in the history of the Sheffield Shield to rack up 400 wickets, and everything you see with him, he's an absolute character and a great guy. He spent time in Tassie, and obviously he's back in New South Wales now. So hats off to him. But keep your eye on the last 2 rounds of the Sheffield Shield. It's going to be very exciting. Lots of results, lots of good games. So we'll watch that with a little bit of glee as it continues, and especially if our teams stay on top. But Broads, we might head out of the cricket nets, take the helmets off, and go and put the mouth guards in and the gloves on, and get ready for some biffs, hey?
Let's do it, mate.
Well, the mouth guards are back in. We're going to go sans headgear and throw the gloves on. It's time to talk biffs, and there's a few mixed headlines, but the biggest thing is there's some interesting fights coming up in both the cage and the square ring.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think probably you'd have to say led by Tszyucastle, the return to Tszyucastle, Timmy Tszyu returning, facing Spencer. Back there, who would have thought this time 12 months ago that we'd ever see Timmy Tszyu back there? I mean, it's you don't want to say how the mighty have fallen a little bit, but it just seems like I think this is a real danger. I mean, if he goes back to Newcastle, I mean, Spencer, a bit of a knockout artist, but in this one, if he loses, where to next?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and as you say, obviously the people in Newcastle, it's where a couple of us from the show, myself and JR, are based, and it's been well received. There's obviously a historical legacy tie going all the way back to the great man Kostya himself. The management for the Tszyu brothers still runs out of Newcastle, all those sorts of things. So it's great to see after what happened with the infamous pull out of Mr. Zarafa previously, and we talked about that the other week and where he sits, but. It's an interesting piece in the career for probably both of these boxers in terms of how this shapes up on the 6th of April. I think we'll see more as it starts to come to fruition, but there's a lot on the line here.
Yeah, I think stylistically, I think this is a much better fight for Tim though as well. I think management really let him down in the last one. Obviously getting in the ring with an absolute killer who throws absolute bricks. I think stylistically this is Spencer's still a great fighter, still has knockout power. We've seen that before, but moving into this one, I think stylistically, Tim really matches up well. The deeper this goes, the more it's going to favour Tim, and that's what we've seen before. This is what he needs to get back into. Instead of hunting these early knockouts, I think he needs to just work his way in like he does, start working the body. Once that gets a bit sore, once he sees blood, and then he just circles in. He circles in. And then once he starts getting inside, it's usually curtains for his opponent. So really just interested to see the way that he goes about this fight. Is he going to take his time, or is he going to try and get it done with quickly?
That's going to be the interesting thing, isn't it, is what tactic they approach this with. We know that how they went into that last fight didn't suit them. It was the matchup problem. But it's interesting. Obviously, Spencer's on the rise. How he matches up and how he approaches it too is going to be an interesting thing. We're obviously very focused on Tszyu from that point of view, but Joey Spencer's going to come into this. He's 19-1 as a pro. He's 8-2 in the amateurs, and he's going to be chasing an upset. In terms of where the crowd sentiment is. Yeah,
and I think boxing is just as much in the mind as what it is physical before. I mean, we saw Tim in his last fight. It was nowhere near. I mean, you could see it on the walkout. You could see it at the start when the bell rang. It was a hesitant Tim, which we hadn't seen up to that stage. I mean, even when he did get split open and he lost that title, he was still charging forward. I still believe that if he didn't get that cut, I mean, there's a high chance he'd still be undefeated. I think that really affected him mentally, and the way he approached his last fight. I think now it's just all going to be about how he attacks this from a mental side. I think he's the far superior boxer in this, but I mean, they Mike Tyson said, everyone's a good boxer until you get punched in the face. And I'm really looking forward just to seeing the differences and in the mindset of Timmy Tszyucastle in this one.
It's going to be interesting. It's a chance for him to push his way back into what is essentially the top 10 of the rating. He's sitting just outside it at the moment after those 2 losses. And yeah, it's really, as you say, it's back to the drawing board if he can't get a win here. The 3 losses in a row at, the stage he is in his career. And, he's 30 years of age, which certainly isn't old. We've seen some boxers. So let's not talk about Mike Tyson going on well past it. But it's one of those pieces, right? Like you start to very quickly lose relevance when you lose 3 in a row.
Especially if they're big cuts, if they're big KOs like the last one. If this is a KO, then, who knows what's next, if there's a next, which we don't want to be talking about. But, I mean, no doubt, I think there'll be 3 people talking big in the lead up to this. Obviously Spencer, obviously Timmy, and then you'll have the little lapdog in Zarafa just chipping away, just desperate for that fight. You can hear him now. You can see him on the socials. He's so desperate for this fight, but at the same time, he's got his hands full with a lot of other matches or potential matchups for him.
Yeah, he might get bashed by Timmy's brother first. I think that might be on the cards if he's prepared to accept it. But it's an interesting piece. We'll wait and see how it all plays out. Let's move from the boxing into the cage, into the octagon, mate. Lots happening in the Aussie circles. We talked about this. It would have been great, theoretically the other week to have had some Aussies headlining the card in 312 in Sydney. But cards 314 and 315 will be headlined by Aussies.
Yeah, Volk's back, announced, obviously, featherweight title going up against Diego Lopez, who an absolutely exciting fighter. If you've never seen him before, make sure you get this pay-per-view. I mean, Volk, we know what he's like, very smart, picks his shots, whereas Lopez is like a ball in a china shop. Just fasten your seatbelt to his action all the time. Very strong on the ground, very strong standing up. So I think this one here, it's going to be a great fight. Like the way these two match up, I don't see an early knockout for either one of these. They're both warriors. I see this one going deep and decision in this one. But also the co-main event in this one, Michael Chandler and Paddy Pimblett. I mean, Paddy finally getting a good opponent, I think you could say. I mean, Michael Chandler's got the fight IQ of you and me, but just a lot more talent inside the ring. I mean, he gets hit in the face so much, but he just keeps on going. And he's another fighter that you just tune in to watch. No matter who he's fighting, he's going to go out there, and it takes a big shot to knock out Michael Chandler. And Paddy Pimblett, stylistically, that's a really interesting one. Obviously, you got Michael Chandler, who loves the stand-up game. Strong wrestling, but then Paddy Pimblett with his jiu-jitsu is just so strong and can submit you from anywhere. So I think that's going to be a great card. Everyone's excited to see Volkanovski back in the ring, and just seeing what kind of Volk. I mean, we talked about it with Tim just before, but are we going to see the Volk who moves forward, or is he going to be back picking his shots and the mindset of him in the lead up too?
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting one. It's a big card. There's people already talking, and some really good experts that are saying that this could be easily certainly the best card we've seen this year, but it may be hard to beat in terms of the card overall. There's some interesting ones. I also noticed there's a battle between a 41-year-old and a 25-year-old further down the card with Jim Miller and Chase Hooper going toe-to-toe. So old enough to be his dad, and I'm sure there'll be some funny comments out of that in there when we have a look at it. So there's some good striking matches as well, Prates versus Neal. So that's huge. But then we head to 315. So that'll be the week after the Zoo fight we just talked about. That's on the 13th of April, Aussie time. Then we head to 315, which is in May. And again, a pretty nice card when we look at the co-main event and the main event. But the big talking point is obviously JDM, Jack Della Maddalena, fighting Bilal Muhammad, another Aussie going for a title. He's going for the welterweight title here. Can't wait for this one too, bro. This one's piqued my interest, certainly.
Yeah, this one here, obviously we saw Muhammad just absolutely dominate Sean O'Malley just for over 5 rounds, just picked him up and just wrestled him like a dog for 5 rounds. And that's one thing, and probably one issue I see stylistically in this one for JDM is Muhammad's cardio is absolutely ridiculous. Like, he will pick you up and he will just not relent for 5 rounds straight. Jax has to be doing a lot of work in the fight camp with his wrestling, probably one of his weaker points, but he's so good at the strike game as well. So he's got to be able to keep his distance. Obviously does have the reach advantage in this one, but I mean, if JDM somehow pulls this off, I think this would be up there with Volk's upset for the title on initial one over Holloway, where it just sort of come from nowhere, gets thrown into a title fight. And then I really think if it goes past the first round, I don't like his chances because Muhammad's cardio is absolutely insane. And then you got Shevchenko in the other co-main event as well. And obviously we know how dominant she's been. So I think that's another great potential card. And then Gilbert Burns up against the undefeated Michael Morales. So another great Burns, another great card. Gilbert Burns, he's just that veteran. If you want to make it in the top 10, you know you've got to defeat Gilbert Burns at welterweight. He's just been consistent. He's been around the mark. He's had these title fights, never quite cracked it, but he's a bit of a gatekeeper in that welterweight division.
Nice to see too. We obviously can continue to see the women's game or the women's fight game emerging here, and there's more and more. We're seeing the co-main events and main events being women. But on this main card, it is actually dominated by women's fights that have been booked in. I think there's 3 of the 5 on the main card are women's fights, and they're all interesting matches on different reasons. And as to your point, you talked about that matchup there as the co-main event in terms of Shevchenko versus Fiorot. And she's got a good record as well. I mean, Shevchenko's going to go in as a very warm favourite, but that's going to be an interesting one. There'll be a nice French support as well because it's in Canada. So yeah, another interesting one to see. They're just kicking goals with the booking of these cards at the UFC.
Yeah, they are. But you do see it go in sort of waves with this. Obviously, fighters work on, they'll fight maybe 3 times a year if you're an active fighter. But you'll see a run of kind of weak cards, which I think we probably have seen over the last 3 months. I mean, let's not talk about what they charge for the UFC event here in Australia for the card that we got given. But yeah, at the same time, I think now and probably over the next 6 months, I mean, we've even got another Australian fighting Brandon Moreno against Steve Urquhart as well, UFC Fight Night coming up. So it comes in waves, and it always has, and it always will with the UFC. And they're very smart with their marketing. I'm just really excited over the next few months. I'd love to see 2 Australians back holding 2 titles.
Yeah, me too. I think, too, just talking about that women's one, we often see the women, resort to a bit of wrestling and those sorts of things a bit more so because they're smaller bodies, but those 2 ladies will both stand up and strike. So that'll be worth watching because they will, you've got a boxer and a kickboxer against a karate/kickboxer. So there'll be some stand-up throwdown in the girls in that co-main event in 315. So either way, we'll be digging into them a bit more as we get closer to them. Can't wait for it, Broads. There's so much happening here. It's a good time to be an Aussie Fights fan. There's lots on the card, lots to look forward to. And in the meantime, mate, we look forward to catching up with lots. Undoubtedly, the Third Man Up podcast will be covering off on plenty of sport, but a bit of Aussie rules as things kick off in the next couple of weeks, mate. How are we going with the Third Man Up, getting back up and running with the great man?
Yeah, going well, mate. Pre-season, it's a great time because everyone's looking fit. Everyone's a contender. Everyone's improved since last season, and no games have been played. So everyone's looking great on the training track.
Everyone's training the house down, mate. I love it. We've been training the house down for our vocals. That's about it. But as always, mate, great to have you on the show. Look forward to talking lots more sport with you over the coming weeks as things just keep on keeping on in the sporting landscape.
No, sounds good. Thanks for having me, mate.
Well, big thank you, first of all, to all of you for tuning in to episode 20. We've enjoyed having you along for the journey, and we hope to see you for many more to come as we continue giving you the black and white on your sporting landscape. No grey opinions. Speaking of the black and white, a big thank you to our co-host who delivered the black and white on debut. Certainly lots of rugby league knowledge. Adam Martin from the Talking Parra podcast. Questionable camera work, but we'll give him a pass on day one. Lachie Avil, Mr. Consistent from Round Ball Australia, continuing to bring the excellence that we know he does. Our man behind the ones and twos, not only doing all the magic that delivers you the show each week, but pinch hitting in around the grounds today, J.R. Carter. And of course, Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. He was everywhere today, picking out and doing all the little bits that we know he does so well. We appreciate Brody coming on so many times and so regularly. Of course, if you want to stay up to date with our show during the week in between our Thursday episodes, which you can find on YouTube and Spotify, make sure to follow us on social media, TikTok, X, Facebook and Instagram. You can find us at all of those homes. The Chris Mack Show is the location and the handle to find. In the meantime, enjoy your sports across the week. It's a huge time of year for sports, as it always is. We look forward to coming back to you and discussing it all and picking it all apart again next week. Thanks again for tuning in.